Good day and welcome to Because Growth Matters, your podcast for everything regarding sales and sales enablement. Today, we are joined by a wonderful guest, Olivia Lockwood. She is a seasoned consultant, facilitator, coach with many, many years under her belt, doing things as varied as sales training, L&D, performance improvement. Your certifications are as long as my arm. You're a certified talent development person, a professional certified coach, a master certified trainer of challenger selling models. You've studied neuroscience of leadership. We're going to dive into that one. You work globally to drive revenue, reduce risk, and achieve sustainable behavior change. Olivia, you're known for combining neuroscience with sales effectiveness and delivering practical impact with credibility, candor, and compassion. I think the compassion shines through. Now, that is the gloss. That's the surface layer. Olivia, you have an amazingly colorful background. You were born in New York, but schooled in rural Jamaica for primary, then back to the US. You went to Texas for high school. Go Texas. And then you went to Texas A&M. And then you traveled the whole world. And you've just been everywhere and done everything. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I'm going to start with one question before you even say hi. What is the big lesson your childhood movement taught you?
Great first question. I'm so happy to be here, Daniel. I think the biggest lesson that my childhood taught me was you can survive. Like, tough stuff can happen and you can get through it. And I don't mean like dramatic dark, just, big moves when you're young, they feel huge. And then when you move again, as a child, I only moved houses, 3 times, but most people don't move houses at all as children. But the fact that I had the stability of my immediate family and my extended family, it really was, you can get through it. You can survive. I do also want to caveat that because there are some people who feel like they haven't survived really difficult childhoods. There was no psychologically defined trauma in my childhood. There was just a lot of change.
And that survival, I'd say grit comes with it, doesn't it?
Totally.
What does grit mean to you?
So grit, is sort of the stick-to-itiveness. It's that persistence. There was an expression when I was at university, you're like a dog with a bone. Not the most positive way to say it because it felt a little like, never let go. But it is that sense of, I'm going to persevere. I'm not going to give up easily. But there's another aspect to grit, which is about like having a reserve. It's like having some extra energy stored that makes you just a little bit more resilient. So maybe when you've tried the 5th time, you've got the ability to try the 6th time, where somebody else with less grit, they won't even try the 3rd time. That's kind of sort of my colloquial definition of grit.
I really like that. I think that getting up again when others can't. When we talk around running ultra marathons and getting into the big mountains, it's doing one more mile that someone else won't. Just one more mile. That's all we want to do. Now, we've spoken about Jamaica, and I've got to say, I have a number of guitars around here. Robert Nesta Marley might be one of my all-time heroes. I loved the new movie that came out about Bob Marley. I've been a stone's throw from Jamaica, but I've never been there. What is the biggest misconception that we have about Jamaica from an outside perspective, fans of Jamaica?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for asking me that. So the biggest misconception is that Jamaicans as a people, and I am generalizing, I know that's risky, we're much more conservative than anyone realizes. We have a solid Christian foundation. Very few Jamaicans are okay with like some of the crazy behaviors, we'll dance wild, but then we go to church. Or we like when I was growing up in my family, we knew if anybody smoked, whatever you want to call it, Mary Jane, ganja, weed, marijuana, if you smoked that, you were done. Like your family was writing you off. That is not what good people do. So there's this side, with the Rastafarians and the music and this laid back beach lifestyle, which we sell because over 30% of our economy is tourism. But when you actually go into a Jamaican home, people are not sitting around smoking weed and drinking rum all day. Like, we go to work. We have no nude beaches, no official nude beaches in Jamaica. We're that conservative. We will provide anything that our visitors want, but ourselves, that's the biggest misconception.
I love that. So family values are very important from a
Oh,
Jamaican
yeah.
perspective.
And discipline and respect for elders. But the other part is that Jamaicans are, again, generalizing, they are as friendly, as welcoming as you think. I've never met a Jamaican who doesn't want to learn more about you. Where are you from? What do you do? And their curiosity comes from a really good place. I don't feel that everywhere I travel, but when you go to Jamaica, there's like, oh, what brought you here? How did you choose us for your holiday? Have you had this kind of banana of our 52 different varieties? It's really welcoming. And those would be, I think, the big misconceptions. Our hospitality is not fake, and our lives are much more conservative than the TV might show you.
That is so nice. That's such a nice insight. And I think the parallels between Jamaica and South Africa, or Africa in general, are a lot closer than people think. Now, I went for a run in London, 10K run. I was greeted 3 times. I did the same sort of run in Johannesburg, in my neighborhood outside where I go. Maybe 100 people would say, "Morning, how are you?" Just a smile. And I think the developing world and where we come from just exudes warmth, and that's why I need to get to Jamaica one day.
Yeah, you need to get to Jamaica, but do not go without telling me so I can have some of my family welcome you.
I'll take that up. Thank you, Olivia. But you ended up in the US and you've spent a lot of time there, and then you've spent a lot of time living in other areas. Why the itchy feet? What was your first sales role, or what was your first role that got you around, moving around the world? And where have you lived?
So, my itchy feet, I'm going to thank my mother for. She always referred to herself as a gypsy. She was the first Jamaican woman to go to the US to pursue a degree that was not nursing or teaching. How amazing is that? And
Wow.
her parents were not thrilled with this choice. So she actually had to have her grandfather pay for her tuition. But off she came to the US, and she went to Boston, and that's where she met my father. And he was an Irish American. Okay. So I think the itchy feet came from there. Then after, when I moved from Jamaica to Texas, that was a huge culture shock because I was old enough to be aware that I was now different. When I was a child, I wasn't aware. You just don't pay attention to it. But now I'm, a young adult. I'm like, oh, I don't look like anybody here. Oh, now I look like everybody here. Those things are really confronting for me in a very good way. I had both my brothers at university, and they kept me very safe. So that was nice. After that, I went back to Jamaica. I wanted to join the Peace Corps. I didn't. I went back to Jamaica. I'm at my grandmother's home, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And I got the perfect job. The first mutual fund, they're called unit trusts, in Jamaica was started, and I was hired as one of their first financial analysts with my bright, shiny business management degree. Off I go to work every day, and I hated it. It's the only job I've ever hated.
But
Every
it
night
was
I'm
your
coming
what
home.
you studied.
It's what I studied. It was like prestigious, and I got a lot of money, and they gave me a company car. And I was just like, oh, kill me now. Every night I would go home to my grandmother and cry, Gran, why do I have to do this? And she's like, you don't. She goes, you have a US passport. Get on a plane, figure it out.
Oh my word. I think I have a crush on her. I want to meet her. That is
Yeah.
amazing. So where did you go?
I went to Miami for the weekend to visit some cousins. And one of my cousins asked me to drive her to an open call interview for Pan American Airlines. Now, I am aging myself. That's okay. And so I drove her. But when we got into the car park, we were told by the parking attendant, well, you can't wait here. So just park and both of you go and you'll be fine. So I got out of the car. I thought there'd be like a place for me to wait inside. Nope. So we're both in this. It's a terrible expression, cattle call. It's an open interview. There's like at least 1,500 people there. Okay. Just go in. And so they have this quick interview, and then you go to this room, you go to this room. And at the end of like 8 hours of this, I walk out and my cousin is waiting for me. I was hired as a flight attendant. She was not. And we're still friends. We still talk, but it took a little while. It took a little while. I'm like, oh boy. And it was super fun. So for 4 years, I flew around the world as a Pan Am flight attendant. And that solidified my itchy feet.
And that's instant feedback from a service perspective. Have you hit the mark? Are you on time? Are you off time? You always on duty? Do you carry some of those lessons with you? Which is the one that you keep in your pocket, that you pull out all the time?
So the one that I remember is, and this is, it's phrased in the negative, but it has a positive meaning. It's that people don't like psychobabble. Like, don't try to say, well, our policy is. They just like, you just take someone who's angry and you make them angrier. You say, I understand that my policy is not working for you. I don't see what choices I have. Do you see a choice I have that I could make now to help? That's what I learned. It's remember that people, they're stressed. Travel is not easy and it's only gotten harder. You're too close to strangers. You usually haven't had your food when you want it. And there's just so much. It's just stressful. So I do keep that with me. But there's a personal grooming thing that I do. I always say to myself, is this the best that you can present yourself right now? Like, could you iron your blouse and could that be better? Could you comb your hair and that be better? Could you maybe not wear jeans to your 90-year-old grandmother's party? Would that be better? We were always told in our uniforms that your uniform should present you as your best, not as an average. And that really has stuck with me. Like, what's my best? Yeah, there's some days I'm tired and there's no makeup and the hair is in a ponytail, but that's the best I can do right then.
Oh, I love that so much. As you'll be, I love that so much. I'm nicking that. After 30 years of doing frontline work, helping teams generate revenue, helping stressful situations, quarter ends, year ends, why do you still do this?
So I'm really like, sort of the foundation of my life is to make others' lives better. My tagline is make good lives great because I'm not qualified to help people who are unwell, right? But if you have kind of a good, decent life, average, I probably have some tips, techniques, tools, or ideas or questions that can help make you better, your life better. Because I don't think people need to be fixed. I think people need to be encouraged. I
Right.
think, that reinforcement, look at all the things you do well, right? Keep doing so much of what you do well. And what's the one thing if you changed it? I'm a real believer in that 1% change. But what really drives me to put my energy to revenue generation is because I've watched how a sales role can transform families. So many people go to work, they have a steady salary. That's a great thing. But if you have a job with a commission or a bonus or some variable income, you can set a different goal. You can say, you know what, our family's going to live on half of our base we're going to save, but that bonus, we're going to buy a house or an investment property or educate someone that we wouldn't have been able to educate because I'm in America and we have to pay for education. We pay for a lot more than other countries do. So I feel like that's what drives me is because when you can get somebody good enough at sales that they achieve their comp plan and they make their bonuses, they change their lives, their family lives, and the community around them. That's why.
Olivia, that is amazing. I mean, that our North Star is to um, is so aligned with that. And I actually want to get the exact wording so I don't mess it up. We grow people that grow companies that change the world. That is what we want to do. And exponential growth is then, you're just talking about generational exponential growth.
Yeah.
How do sales managers hinder that, in your opinion?
Take a breath and don't dump all over the poor sales managers. So number one, it's a fact, and people think because it's a fact, it's a good thing. So many sales managers are still promoted from excellent sales professional to average or weak sales manager. It's two different jobs, two different sets of skills, and they don't get training. So my goal is when I meet a sales manager, like if they are the star performing sales manager, I just want them to be humble enough to say, I'm really great at what I do, and here's an area I can still get better at. The star sales leaders, they will know their area of improvement and they'll happily work on it. Okay. Your average sales leader, they'll do a lot right, but their teams aren't thriving and vibrant. Their teams are like plodding. That's how you know an average manager, right? You look out and an average manager's team, it's that classic 80% of them are achieving 75% of quota. And 2 or 3 are achieving 100 and they think they're a star. Like, no. We can't grow organizations when people are only achieving 75 or 80% of their goals. We need them to overachieve more often. A lot of leaders have no idea. Frontline sales managers do not know how to help their team overachieve. They think they need to do it. No, you're not a savior. You're not, that man, what do they call them? The knights in shining armor coming in on your horse to close the deal and save no, you're literally taking learning opportunities away from your team when you do that. And then, oh my gosh, if we talk about the really underperforming leaders, I say in my best, kindest way, they create learning-free experiences. Nobody learns anything. Nobody grows. The only thing they learn is duck and cover.
So let's take a step back. If you're explaining to your son's friend who knows nothing about what we do, what do you do for organizations? How do you explain that over a barbecue?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. My son had a games night last night, and 2 of his friends were like, Miss Olivia, what do you actually do for work? Because all they know is I'm not here half the time. So what I tell people is I'm a consultant in the truest sense, in that I look at an organization, typically a department that is trying to make money for the organization, and I point out some areas that they may not be looking at that they have the ability to change. So that's my consultant role. If they agree that the gap that I pointed out is worth changing, then I can execute with them to change it. I can work with them to create that change. And the change I create is around behavior. I don't do process change anymore. I did that at Arthur Andersen. I don't do systems change anymore. I did that when I worked for Vertex. Now I do people change. So that's how I explain it I can't really explain my job yet to a 7-year-old, but I can explain it to a high schooler.
And when you hear sales teams say, oh, we are customer centric, but they kind of fall prey to this recency bias, what are 3 good steps to get people from a management perspective to be truly customer centric?
So I want to give a shout out to my friend and former colleague, Brent Adamson and Carl Schmidt, who just published The Frame Making Sale. I now judge leaders on whether they've read this book or not, especially if they say customer centric to me. So I have, if I can, I just want to give you a little background. So my very first sales training, which I'm so appreciative because I worked for Arthur Andersen and they gave us training in everything. was with Mike Bosworth. You might remember that name as the founder and writer of Solution Selling before it was sold to Keith Eads and SPI. He was my first sales trainer. Like, how amazing is that? And then Mike and I stayed in touch. So as he went forward, and then he wrote Customer Centric Selling, another great book, right? He taught me that it is not customer centric if you can't detach. So as a salesperson, if I can't look at my customer problem and say, oh, you know what? Our solution might help, but it might not. So they really should spend this money on something else. If you can't see that, you're too attached to your solution. You're not actually customer centric. So come forward to 2025. I mean, that happened in, for me, 1994, 1998, 2006. Come on, back in the old century, in the old country, in the old century. But, back in the day, that really helped me. And I've used it. But now Brent wrote this new book, and a lot of the ideas have been said before. But what he's saying is a lot of what we think is customer centric is getting the customer to like you and your products. But really customer centricity is helping the customer solve a problem, whether it's with you or not. So do you know how we've heard those stories over and over? Like, yeah, I told my customer this wasn't the right solution for them. And they were so like shocked and grateful. And then 3, 5, 10, 15 years later, they're still coming to me buying more and more and more because of that honesty. That's customer centricity to me. And that's what I try to get managers.
And that gap between the sales strategy where we say we're customer centric and we the customer is at the center of it versus being executed on the ground, do you see that more of our customers are getting it right, or do you see that the strategy is done on a Wednesday and never looked at again until the Wednesday of the next year? Where are we in general?
So this is not like my wheelhouse, but my anecdotal evidence, because I just, it's the end of the year. I just wrapped up. So I worked with 64 different companies last year. I touched 64 different organizations. And sort of my gut feeling tells me that medium-sized businesses, those businesses in the 50 million to maybe 250 million range, that kind of company, their strategies are informing their day-to-day behavior more than the really small companies or the really big orgs. I see, because I again, I have the privilege of last year I worked with 6 of the Magnificent Seven, which is amazing to me, right? And for those of your listeners who don't know what that is, it's the top 7 tech companies in the US that drive most of the US stock market value. So it's, Meta, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. So those companies, the strategy lives into the middle level. But if you ask a lot of like frontline professionals, sellers, or frontline sales managers, they struggle a little bit to find their mission statement. They'll be like, it's something about help every organization to achieve more. That's the Microsoft mission statement. But it's like, actually, it's to inspire every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Help and inspire are 2 different verbs. People are like, oh, Olivia's got her stuff together. So it's a credibility moment, but it's also like, really? You're like here to help? You're not a customer service rep, right? Your job is to take some of the world's greatest technology out and change people's existence for the better. And you're getting wrapped up in a SKU code? Give me a break.
There's a lot of pressure in sales at the moment. You mentioned tech. The tide is out. People are not necessarily generating value. We've had order takers for years. We've had young salespeople that have gotten used to people saying, oh, you work at ABC company. I love that logo. I would value, come and here's my budget. Go and spend my budget. Beyond the top line results, in order to assist your sales team, what do you think is essential to track, to pick up problems before they occur so we can develop and guide our sales teams for a good sales manager.
Yeah, so I want to give another shout out to another really wonderful colleague of mine, Matt Gallagher. He calls himself the repairman for sales teams. And over the last 2 years, I've tried to scope down, like if I only get 4 hours with a team, what do they need to know? So if the team is a team of sales professionals, what they need to know is how to prospect. Like get back to prospecting. And I don't mean cold calling. I mean asking for referrals. Use your existing customers to either upsell within the org through, different solutions that you provide, or to sell the same solution to other companies that they know. You need to ask that all the time, all the time, all the time. So that's for individual contributors. But for sales managers, which is, where you and I both like to sort of spend more of our time, I'm constantly like, how do you think you're a good sales manager when your forecast accuracy is the worst? I was going to use a curse word, but I'm not. Like, you cannot forecast, therefore you are not a good manager. Done. And the way you forecast is you learn how to run a really good pipeline review. And so many leaders, and I'm not going to fault a leader who's never been trained. But Matt and I, we go out and we help teams understand how to do a forecast meeting differently and better, and how to do a pipeline review differently and better. And our results have been outrageous. We had one company, they sent 6 leaders, okay? 3 of the leaders took on, it was like the perfect control group. 3 of the leaders took on the 2 techniques that we shared, and they doubled bookings in 60 days. Did you hear me? Doubled bookings in 60 days. And the 3 leaders who were like, yeah, this doesn't work for me, flat. The skill is there. We need to teach it, and people need to use it. You got to learn how to do a good pipeline review.
Pipeline review is key. It's the crystal ball into the next quarter and the next year. Yeah, we understand. I've actually got the question here: how do we improve forecast accuracy? But you've already answered that.
Well, let me give you a little piece of the technique. So most pipeline reviews, how's this deal going? Good. How's this one? Good. How about this one? Well, that one may have to skip, but only, push out, but only if we give them another discount. Okay, I'll go talk to people. Those are vibe checks. Those are not pipeline reviews. I don't know what those are.
Say it again.
I'm like, your deal review is not, hey, salesperson, what do you think? They crank up the sunshine pump, blow smoke at the manager, and the manager goes, yes. That's not a pipeline review. So in a pipeline review, you look for the clues. If all deals close at the end of the month, this person does not know how to time a deal, right? If it slips more, whatever your average deal cycle is, right? Whatever that average sales cycle is, if it's double, you're losing that deal. Pull it out of the pipe. People are like, no, you can't pull it out of the pipe. It might come back 3 years later. Do not do that.
It's actually my favorite module to lecture is nurturing pipeline health, because there are so many practical, easy ways to improve it. And what I find fascinating is how quickly people go from a pipeline review into a deal review, and you leave the other 10 members of the meeting just sitting there with their fingers in their nose. So it's hard. These things that you do all speak to behavioral change. Sales managers taking on something new, sales professionals, contributors, understanding prospecting is part of their world. They need to go out there and create value for customers. What are your 3 tips to ensure these behaviors are adopted and sustained? What can a sales manager do to make it part of their culture?
So the very first thing, which I believe is the hardest, is they need to commit to a statement, right? When something happens, I will something else. If you leave a conversation, a training, whether it's live, virtual, live on site, e-learning, whatever, and you can't say, when X happens, I will Y, there will be no change. We need a commitment statement, and we need one. Like these managers who show up to training and they say things like, oh, I'm here and I'll get some reminders. And, if there's a nugget or two, I'll be fine. I'm like, okay, you are not here to learn. You are here to try to be the expert in the room. So you can just go back to your regular job. You don't need to sit through this. Because if you aren't hearing like every 10 to 15 minutes something that you're not doing or you've never tried, we are not doing our job. We didn't build this to remind you, right? And they're always like, oh, like that's, wake up. But then if at the end of each, let's call them modules or section, what each concept we're trying to teach, if they can't say, okay, so when I see this, I do this instead. Why are you here? So that commitment is number one. Then number two is somebody should be their manager, but not always. Could be a peer. It could even be a direct report. Somebody's going to ask them about that commitment statement. So that's the reinforcement. Commit, get reinforcement. Now remember, if both of you can't even remember what was it you committed to at the end of that session, no behavior change. Reinforce until it is natural to them. This is the part we like, oh, I asked 3 times, then I'm done. No, you may need to be asking that for the next 6 months. You may need to ask certain things for a full business cycle. That's a year for one behavior change. And people don't want behavior change to be slow. They want it to be immediate. But habits, some of these complex management habits, they take time, right? And then the third one is to celebrate. I see you improving. I see you consistently trying, even though we're still making some mistakes, you're getting better. So when you see this, I see you doing partial Y.
Okay, I was just making a list there.
Commit,
Commit, reinforce,
reinforce,
and
and celebrate.
celebrate. I like that. That's very good. We juggle many priorities, especially sales managers. How do you advise them balancing their time on quota, people development, cultural development, and reporting?
Okay, so this is where I go to the joy that is growth matters. I love how all of you, Chris and Alan and Tony and you have written up like the role of the sales manager. It is to drive the number through the people by executing strategy to achieve customer value. You notice I didn't have to read it off of my notes because I know this stuff,
Come
right?
on.
Come on. All right. And here's the funniest thing. I have nothing on my desk, but look what I have here.
Ah, you spare. Come on. That's so good. That's so good, Olivia.
But those 4, I tell people when you look at your calendar, and you should do at the end of each week, like a little calendar review. If you look at where your time got spent, if you can't bucket it into those 4, like developing people means you helped them get ready for the meeting, not you ran the meeting for them. It means you asked them to create the proposal and then you reviewed it. You didn't create the first draft and ask them if they liked it. Like that is how I think you remove a lot of the overselling side of a sales manager's job. And the other thing that I encourage, and again, Growth Matters has a process around this as well. I encourage people, someone invites you to a meeting, you need to know the purpose and your role. Like if you invite me to a meeting and I don't know why I'm there, the first thing you're going to get back from me is, I guess I appreciate you inviting me, but why do you want me there? I'm giving up $1,000 to be there. Why? And they're always like, oh, we actually don't need you. We just thought you might be interested. Send me a bleeding recording. I'll listen to it in the car. Like, come on. I just don't think we protect our time, right? What is it that Alan always says? Your calendar is the picture of your priorities, I really think that's true. But your specific question, like how should we divide up? I think a sales leader who's with a winning team, they have permission from the organization to do more reporting and more innovation. If you have an average team, you have to do more admin. You have to do more checking because you're not achieving. And I think that's how it gets decided, by your performance as a leader.
That was amazing. That was amazing. Olivia, I wanted to, we're almost time, and I really want to ask you, for a new person, and you spoke about us, we promote people who just, they are such good contributors, and then we expect them to achieve what they have been doing, but we don't give them a framework and an ecosystem. That's what we teach, that's what we go. Your top 3 tips for a new sales manager today, what are the top 3 takeaways that someone who's never going to work with Olivia Lockwood, but can take Olivia Lockwood and put them into their heart?
Okay. So the first thing is, before you get promoted or before you seek the promotion from individual contributing sales professional to frontline sales manager. Okay. Before you seek that role, do some personality profiling, professional profiling. Do you have the interest in other people? Like, I recommend, you can do any of them. Like, seriously, you can do FIRE-OB, MBTI, Strengths Finders. I don't care. But you have to have enough concern for others that you will sublimate, big word, your own desires for someone else's. It's more important for the team to achieve than for me to achieve. You got to reduce the ego. So that's before you get promoted. Okay. So then tip 1, as you're being considered for promotion, as you're going through your interviews, you must ask the organization, not just the head of sales, but the HR team, right? The RevOps team. You need to ask, what is my professional development plan? When will I get my manager training? When will I get my sales manager training? Those are 2 different things, right? And if they say, oh, you'll figure it out, ooh, you can just say, okay, I don't want this job, or I want this job and I'm going to night school. I'm going to weekend classes, right? The internet is out there for us. We can learn most of this, right? But you
The
need
SMDP is out there for you. I'm
right,
here for you. Do you know what I mean?
right,
Yeah.
right. There, but my point is, it is the responsibility of the person being promoted to ask how they're going to learn the roles of the new job. Okay. That's number 1. Number 2, who's going to help me get better day by day, week by week, month by month? What's my continuous learning? Do I have a mentor? Do I have another sales leader who knows their responsibility is to coach me up for a year? I've never been through a budget cycle. Who's going to help me? Right? So you want to ask, how am I going to get trained and who's going to help me? And then third, what do I do when the proverbial hits the fan? Because there are going to be mistakes. There's going to be blow-ups. And in your interview process, if you bring those up, you're showing that I want this role and I want to be successful. So I'm looking for where I'll fall off the rails. I'm looking for the bumps that are going to come. And then post-promotion, please get somebody, a coach, a friend, who will give you constructive, right? That it's positive, but it's redirecting feedback. Feedback is either reinforcing, keep doing what you're doing, it's amazing, or it's redirecting, try this instead. You need somebody that you can call, text, email, like, what am I missing here? And they'll tell you, I think it's this.
And my last kind of rabbit hole question on this: if you had to have only 30 minutes dedicated to an execution discipline for the sales manager, where should they spend it to make their team super?
Pipeline review.
Okay. Yeah, we go back to pipeline.
Yeah.
High five to you. I love that high five.
30 minutes, you teach them the difference. We touched on it. There's a difference between a pipeline review and the deal review, and they shouldn't be mushed together, right? So if you can help them run a good pipeline review, then they'll know which deals they have to revisit, right? But if you can't get through all, well, guess what? You don't know. There's some that are still the unknown.
So, Ms. Lockwood, in our preparation, I sent you like send me a couple of questions, and you sent me a real teaser, which was, what is your word for 2026? I've got 3 more wrap questions. That's the first one. What is your word for 2026, the year of the horse?
The year of the horse. Okay. So, every year I try to think of a word that's sort of going to be my touchstone. Like when I'm having a tough day, I'm going to say, remember, you're trying for this year. And it was kind of a rough year for me the last couple of years because my mom passed and I've really been struggling with it. But what I realized is the word of this year, strange, it was going to be permission. Like, just ask permission before I do stuff because I'm very much a believer in just do it and beg forgiveness. And I did ask for way too much forgiveness. But as I thought about it a little deeper, it's like it's not permission that I want, it's consent. I want people, if I want to give you a hug, I want you to want that hug. I don't just want to like give you, and then you're like, oh, what was that all about? Right. If I want to ask you a question, you know, would it be okay if I asked you kind of, a deeper question? I want to actively seek consent before I behave in the ways I'd like to behave. That's my word.
I love that word. I love that word. I'm going to take that consent. And it's for me, what I just heard there is you taking into account other people's feelings before your own.
Yeah.
So I have this impulse to do this, but how is it going to land with their? Yeah, I went on an interesting course last year called Dethroning Race. And one of the statements that Ryan made, the author and the pastor, is just remember it's not what you say, it's how it's heard. And
Intent
that
versus impact.
completely, and it made me so aware, especially in these institutional race things that we have in place. What is a flippant comment for me can be devastating from someone from a different background, and consent comes into it. It's where are you, how are you taking this, can we proceed together? I love consent.
Yeah. So
Brilliant,
it's
you
so
just got me
funny
there.
that you said that. And you didn't ask me this, but the number one thing that when people say, Olivia, how come like when people have conversations with you, they typically feel better after the conversation than they did before? Like that's kind of, 90% plus. It's rare for me to like really upset somebody. And I'm like, it's because I'm always looking to see if my intention matches my impact. What I intend doesn't actually matter. I intended it as a joke. Who cares? It hurt your feelings. You need an apology. Right? The impact was negative, therefore I have to, right? And that intention versus impact, that's what that your comments brought to me. Because the expression I use, and I use this a lot in virtual training, it's like, remember, if something comes out of my mouth and lands on your ears negatively, please give me an opportunity. It wasn't in my heart. Please tell me it landed harshly so I have an opportunity to fix it for you. Because we have to be active about this stuff. It's not okay to just know, yeah, I stepped on that person's feelings. It's like, what am I going to do to try to fix it?
It's a very anti-establishment, especially at the moment. If we look at the global stage, it's very anti-establishment, and if we learn from a teacher that walked a couple of thousand years ago, anti-establishment is a good thing.
Yeah.
Anti-establishment it's not where all the cool people are, because the world needs it. And leading with love is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of power.
Well,
I
and,
like
and
that.
it's, it's not one faith tradition. We have the Buddha, we have Confucius, we have the Quran with Muhammad, we have the Christian teachings, with Christ. And they all said the other is more important than the individual, but we don't know how that shows up until we're showing it up in our lives. So to me, that's the cross feature of all philosophical and religious traditions. So that's where I feel really good if I because I only speak one language. I mean, I do speak Patois, but really I only speak English, variations of English. My husband's British, my American, my son's Virginian. But I know intention versus impact most people will get. If I start bringing in my religious background, I can, especially here in the US, you can really turn people off very quickly.
So my second to last question, in the last 45 or 50 minutes, I've asked you a whole bunch of questions. But if you were running this interview with Olivia Lockwood, what is the one question you would have asked her?
What would I have asked myself? You've asked so many good questions. Oh my God, that's wrong. It's not
Woohoo!
okay.
I got to pass. I got to pass.
Well, when I was preparing for this call, I read about you because that's what we do. And you, in your blurb on LinkedIn, you said, "What do? I use the tools that I teach." So I would have asked, "What's your favorite tool to teach right now?"
Olivia, what is your favorite tool to teach right now?
You are so funny, Daniel. Okay. So interestingly, because it was year end and people are gearing up, the leaders I'm working with, they're all gearing up for their commercial kickoffs this first quarter, or even in the tech companies, they're gearing up for their second half of the year. What I've been teaching them is this 2x2 grid, and I don't know the name of it. So if you find the name of it, please share it. But it's a change management grid. So on the vertical, if you put passive and active, okay, so something that you're strongly or weakly, and then on the horizontal, for or against. So if you're passively for something, top left, right, you're a supporter. And if you're actively for something, bottom left, you're a champion. And if you're passively against, top right, you're a skeptic. And if you're actively against, you're a saboteur. So you have these 4 buckets of people. And so going into a meeting or going into an event, you're thinking, okay, Olivia is a skeptic, Daniel is a champion, someone else is a supporter, someone else is a saboteur. But oh my gosh, I don't know what Tom is. He's a fence sitter in the middle. And I've been telling my sales enablement and my chief revenue officers, figure this out before you show up. So you can go to the saboteurs and say, what's your big concern? Because you bring up the same concern every time. And we've told you we're not going to fix it. Are you going to agree and get on board? Or are you just going to keep doing this? It allows you to have, very, very useful conversations with people if you label them. And the best thing is when you've labeled them wrong. They're like, no, I'm not against the initiative. I'm against the person you put in charge of the initiative. What have you just learned? Something very useful.
That is so useful. Thank you so much, Olivia. My last question for you, that 1%, that difference that makes good managers exceptional.
Okay, so the 1% that I think the best leaders, especially frontline sales managers, that right dealing with the professionals, I think their best thing that they can do is be willing to risk learning, like really try something new. It takes a risk, it takes effort and energy and focus. But I think that risk is the best thing they can do by far.
I love that. That's so cool. And I've learned so much in this discussion. I've taken copious notes. I'm going to look for that 2x2 grid if you get it. You've recommended a book. Give me the title for the book again, because as usual, I was listening to you and not writing it.
Okay. So the book is called The Frame Making, FRAME, Frame Making Sale. And it's by Brent Adamson and Carl Schmidt. And just so that you know, they have amazing resources on their website. So if you want to sort of look at a podcast or get a little ebook or interview question.
Where do our listeners get hold of you? How can they contact you and see your services?
So for most people, just reach out on LinkedIn. I'm Olivia R. Lockwood. If you want to know a little bit more, My website is www.openupcoaching.com. But I do want to thank you, Daniel,
Olivia,
because we didn't tell our audience that we had to keep rescheduling because we were both so busy. But I actually viewed this as a birthday gift. My birthday was 2 days ago, and I said, I am not changing this. I am getting this done. So thank you.
come on, happy
Great.
birthday. And happy birthday. And may 2026 just be a year of 67 new customers, more impact, wonderful new connections. And to our listeners, may this first quarter just fly by in a positive way. From Because Growth Matters, have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Because Growth Matters. If you found this conversation valuable, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate this show 5 stars on the platform you're listening from and share it with someone who'd benefit from the conversations. Make sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. See you then.